Troops. Every now and then we get some new ones and it can be a hit or miss. Sometimes they suck ass while other times they're literally destroying the meta. Balance changes are also a factor. A troop can be terrible and no one uses it, and then it suddenly gets a buff and then it's way too OP. So today I thought I'd talk about 8 troops that at one point were incredibly broken. Now there's way more than 8 of course, so if you don't see one that should have been mentioned today, feel free to leave it in the comments below and I'll probably do a follow-up. Anyways, with that being said, let's get right into it.
Let's do this.
Royal Ghost. The Royal Ghost is a temporary troop that usually comes around Halloween, and it appeared in 2019, 2021, and 2022. And every time it had the exact same stats. Some call it the Sneaky P.E.K.K.A. because it's basically a P.E.K.K.A. that had the same abilities as Sneaky Goblins for 12 whole seconds. What the hell were they thinking? It sounds OP as hell. But that's not all. Oh no. It was only a third of the housing space of a P.E.K.K.A. and it could pass through walls. Yikes. By the sound of it, that can't be good. Unless you were the attacker, this was more OP than my dad with a belt. The Royal Ghost was used in practically any situation, to farm, trophy push, to do clan wars, to do your mom. It was able to help you crush a base with very little skill. The best way to use it was to use it exactly how you use a sneaky goblin, but instead of going for that loot, you're going for defenses and pretty much anything that can get in the way from your heroes going inside the base. So basically, you funnel with the Royal Ghost, then drop your heroes in siege machines, and then drop the rest of your Royal Ghost to clean up the rest. And with the help of the bat spell, free spell, haste, and all of the other spells, 3-starring a base was a walk in the park. The Royal Ghost was just way too OP for the housing space, enabling players to bring well over 30 of these. Now, I know I keep using words like was and used to, that's because it's not currently in the game, but I do expect it to come back in 2023, and it's probably going to be just as chaotic again. The Witch. The Witch was added to the game in July 2013, and it was kind of an instant hit. So much that she received a nerf just a month later because her range was insane. But that didn't stop the Witch from drastically changing the meta from 2013 all the way to 2016. Since 2013 was the year of Dark Elixir troops, we also happened to get the Golem, and it didn't take long for players to pair the Witch with the Golem. The community had created a game-breaking and incredibly OP strategy. Go Wee Wee. Go Wee Wee is composed of golems, witches, and wizards, and basically the golem would shield the witches and wizards, and since witches spawned skeletons, they were also shielded by the golem. It's pretty simple, but there were also some other mechanics at play here that allowed the strategy to work so well. First, in those days, you could lure heroes out easily and get rid of them. Then there was the fact that skeletons from the witch activated traps, further protecting the witches and wizards from giant bombs and sprint traps. And also, depending on levels, defenses usually struggled to keep up with the vast amount of skeletons that the witches were spawning. Go Wee Wee was basically unstoppable, and almost no base design was able to properly defend against it. And also the fact that the Grand Warden came out in late 2015, which amplified the strategy. This is until March 2016, where witches received a massive nerf to a critical key part that made them so good. Skeletons no longer activated traps, meaning at any point of an attack that used witches, they could suddenly be wiped out by giant bombs or sets of spring traps. This was pretty much the moment when the witch lost that OP status, and the meta would continue to evolve past it. The Bat Spell. The Bat Spell was released on December 10th, 2018, and just 2 days after release, it was nerfed pretty heavily. But it seems that wasn't enough, as just 3 weeks later, it was nerfed again. So what exactly made the Bat Spell so OP that it had to be nerfed into oblivion? Well, I'm gonna put it as simple as I can. Too many bats. Way too many bats. The bat spell was spawning so many bats that it allowed it to distract defenses for far too long. And then players realized, wait a minute, if one spell's good, what about 9? Oh no. That's exactly what players started to do. And for a couple days, Lava Loon with bat spells was the most broken strategy there was. Screw your defenses. Matter of fact, screw your anti-whatever base. With the new bat spell, your defenses were rendered useless. They'll be too focused on those damn bats that by the time they're done, the whole base has been wiped out. Like I mentioned, a couple days later they would get a nerf, and this was basically reducing the amount of bats. At almost every level, a third of the bats had just disappeared just like that. But this was not enough, and the bat spells prevailed. A little less OP, but still OP. And for almost a month, Lavaloon was still destroying everyone's bases. But in January 7th, 2019, they would be nerfed again, especially at the lower levels. Comparing a level 1 bat spell today to release, it used to spawn more than double the bats. Some people consider these nerfs to be too hard on the bats, but I don't really use the bat spell, so I don't really have an opinion. But damn, for about a month, the bat spell was shaking the hell out of the meta. El Primo. El Primo was a temporary troop that only appeared once in December 2018 to celebrate the launch of Brawl Stars. And it was kind of like a giant but much faster, like almost as fast as a hog. It was stronger, did 20 times more damage to walls, and the only drawback was the housing space. If properly funneled, the Primos would go in and sweep the base at a very fast rate, especially if they were under a combination of rage and heal spells. They were practically unstoppable. It was very similar to the 2014 Hog Rider era. Goddamn, Primos gave me PTSD. Reminds me of those nematodes from SpongeBob.
Oh, dang, nematode.
So many players also adopted this temporary troop as their main troop to farm with, as it was incredibly effective at destroying any kind of base. Nothing was safe. As long as you funneled it properly and got them inside the base, it was over for the defender. Now, El Primo didn't have any special abilities or anything like that, but instead it was the stats that were the highlight. El Primo was a beefy, fast tank unlike anything else we have in the game, or at least at the time. And that's what made him so OP. Now, like I said, he would only appear once, so he kind of shook the meta for about 20 days, but it seems Supercell took some inspiration for the Super Giant, maybe. It's not even close to how OP El Primo was, but it kind of reminds me of it because it's stronger and does increase damage to walls. Hog Rider. Ah yes, probably one of the most well-known buff disasters ever. The Hog Rider basically dominated the meta around 2014. However, when the Hog Rider was first added in March 2013, players actually thought it sucked because for the housing space of 6, at the time of course, it wasn't all that great at anything really. It would get distracted far too easily by any building because it didn't have any preferred target. But it didn't take long for Supercell to give them a buff, and boy did they give them a buff. God damn. In August 2013, they now targeted defenses, and the damage increased at all levels. Suddenly, the Hog Rider went from being ignored to one of the most OP troops in the game's history. From here on out, the players figured out that mass hog attacks were incredibly effective at wiping a base clean, even being able to 3-star town halls above you. The Hog Rider was just too fast, had too much HP, and did too much damage, all for 5 housing space. And it was also a different time. There was less traps. You could lure the heroes out and take care of those in like 20 seconds. There were a couple of attempts to slightly nerf it after this buff, but it didn't seem to make a big difference, and its popularity just kept rising. It wouldn't be until July 2014 where a different kind of nerf was implemented. Giant bombs now did 1.5 times more damage to hogs. Suddenly, anti-hog bases exploded in popularity because everyone was trying to defend their base against these damn hogs. However, the strategy was still very strong, and it would remain to be one of the easiest go-to strategies for trophy pushers and clan wars. Fast forward to today though, after many changes to the game, new defenses and different hero mechanics, mass hogs is still a widely used strategy, but it does take a bit more planning and strategizing. It's not the foolproof strategy that it once was. The bowler. I never really used the bowler, but I've seen how it's evolved since 2016, and I heard a lot of horror stories about those days. Or success stories if you were the attacker, that's usually how it goes. The bowler was added in March 2016 with a housing space of 8. It wasn't really a hit, so it did receive a buff shortly after, but it would be the May 2016 update that would cause the bowlers to disrupt the meta pretty heavily. The housing space was reduced from 8 to 6, and that was more than enough to make the bowlers incredibly effective effective, as you can now train way more of them for the exact same stats. The most popular way to use the bowlers was an army composed of almost all bowlers with a few healers. You would create a simple funnel, and in went the vast amount of bowlers followed by healers. And for the rest of the game, you just sit back, relax, activate your heroes when necessary, and you were set. It really was a drop and forget strategy. And others would just literally use all bowlers without the healers. But that wouldn't last for long, as in October 2016, they would get an HP decrease. This basically ended the bowler spam, as they were now weaker, they died faster. But bowlers didn't go anywhere, it just made the spam strategy less effective and harder to use. For the next 2 years, it was a strong troop. I wouldn't say OP at all, but strong. But unfortunately for the bowlers, it would get nerfed again in June 2018, reducing their damage at all levels. After that, there's been numerous balance changes and the game has changed as a whole, but damn, for about 6 months in 2016, you really couldn't ignore the bowler. It was everywhere. Either you were using it and destroying everybody, or your base was getting destroyed by bowlers. Or both. The healer. Another reason why the bowler was so powerful that I didn't mention is that at its peak, the healers worked differently. I'm going to run through this one really quickly because the specific buffs and nerfs I'm going to be talking about are a very brief moment in the healer's history, but I thought it was still worth mention. In February 2015, healers were buffed to no longer trigger air traps anymore. And air traps were the main reason why they weren't as effective before. So now they could just go in a pace, and the only thing they have to worry about is defenses that shoot air. And that was never really a problem because other troops can shield for the healers. So after this change, strategies like the queen walk and that bowler strategy previously mentioned began to explode. All you had to do was make sure that your healers weren't being destroyed by an air defense, for example, which was easy. The healers were now way too powerful, and even after some attempts to nerf it, they were still everywhere. But in August 2016, Supercell would revert this change. Now, don't get me wrong, some strategies that rely on the healers didn't go anywhere. Queen walk is still relevant, but they aren't nearly as OP as they was in 2015 and 2016. They're still very strong in the correct circumstances, but just not OP, you know what I mean? I think they're at a good spot right now. Miner. The miner has a strange history. What made it OP in the first place may have been an unintended feature. Right off the bat, when released in June 2016, the miners were a hit. They were as fast as hogs, destroying defenses like piranhas. They also couldn't take damage while underground, which was a huge portion of their travel time, so yeah. And when paired with heal spells and rage, they were very OP. That's an understatement, but I can't find a word for it right now. Think of like Hog Rider and El Primo OP. One thing in common with all these strategies is that they were all spam attacks. Because if one troop is effective, then a full army of it must be unstoppable. And that they were. It seemed like nothing could stop the damn miners, but there was a key reason why. Defenses would keep targeting the miners and firing at them underground where they couldn't take damage. So it basically distracted your defenses while they did zero damage. And defenses like Inferno Towers and Expos and Eagle Artillery, which can be depleted, would get depleted for no reason. In August that same year though, their speed was decreased, and in October there was some changes that made defenses retarget if the miner went underground. This marked the end of miner spam, or at least how OP it was. Of course, there are still strategies similar to this, but it's definitely not the drop and forget type of deal it was before. Those were some tough days for your base. So guys, that's my list of the most broken troops in Clash of Clans history. Obviously, there's probably way more troops that we could talk about, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video. From the top of my head, there's mass dragons. That one time balloons were OP. I think Valkyries were literally unstoppable at one point, but perhaps those can come in the form of a second part. Producing videos once a week, it can be hard to finish a video that's like 20 minutes long, you know, especially how I'm just a one-man team. I'm sure you guys understand. So yeah, let me know if you guys are interested in that. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching. HaVoC Gaming outs. Peace.